Welcome to our first chapel service of 2016. Looking out of the windows at the snow today, it finally looks and feels like winter at Cardigan. Getting to chapel in cold or wet weather can be a little more complicated than it is in warmer weather. We may be dealing with coats, hats, or umbrellas, or needing to warm our hands after coming in from the cold. And all that makes settling down and centering ourselves into this space a little more difficult.
But never fear. Your trusty chapel assistants are here to help by guiding you into a mindful pause in your busy week. 2 minutes of quiet during which no one will talk to you, or look at you, or disturb your peace in any way. 2 minutes to focus on the present moment and to be aware of the relief of simply being instead of doing. So first of all, please sit up straight and take a deep breath.
We will ring the bell one time to start the meditation. At that point, you may wish to close your eyes or soften your gaze at a point on the floor in front of you. After 2 minutes, we will ring it 3 times. On the third ring, you can open your eyes and return to the space.
So can everyone close their eyes, please?
All right, thank you, Andres and Jalen. And thanks too to Mr. Burrett's advisory group for greeting us all so warmly on this very cold winter day, and to Mrs. Perricone for the lovely prelude as usual. Today we are pleased to welcome to chapel Imris Alku, who is going to offer our gift of music. We also welcome Mr. Irwin, who will be speaking on behalf of our mentors, and Peter Lee, who will speak on behalf of the brothers. But before we begin, I want to take a moment to review, to remind all of us about where we are in our year-long heroes journey. Looking back, we recall that in September, we heroes accepted the call to adventure. And in the weeks to follow, we assembled our trusted mentors, our favorite sidekicks and companions. And then we identified some of the gifts that we've been given that will help us as we go forward. So as we stand on the threshold of this new year, it's time to ask an important question, and that is, now what? Well, we've come a long way already, but all of the work that we've done so far isn't so much behind us, it's actually under us. Our experiences thus far have formed a solid foundation. Working through the challenges in the first part of the year has actually prepared us to meet what may be some pretty big challenges ahead. If we were reading or watching the movie, the story, The Fellowship of the Ring, this would be the part where Frodo and Sam are making their way towards Mordor and Mount Doom. They can see it in the distance. Or in Star Wars, when Luke Skywalker and the Republic set out against all odds to destroy the Death Star and to conquer the evil empire. They haven't done it yet, but they can see what their mission is. Or when Dorothy and her companions in The Wizard of Oz enter the spooky forest on the way to the Wicked Witch's castle. They're not at that castle yet. They've got some trials and thickets to go through before they get there. So at this point in the monomyth journey, the heroes begin to face trials and tribulations and temptations. This is the season in ancient literature of sirens and shipwrecks. in more modern tales of giant spiders and flying monkeys and dreadful dementors. Now, thankfully, at the point in the story of the Cardigan journey, we don't have those big threats, but this is the part where the heroes enter, finally, the notorious New England winter time. This is the point where we encounter our own trials, our own tribulations, the bitter cold, the dark gray days, bouts of homesickness, physical exhaustion, short tempers, and injuries. It may feel at times as if we're entering a big gaping cave or a tunnel of darkness, one that may or may not have an end. But let us not be afraid. We are not alone. We have each other, and we each have our gifts, the little individual lights that each of us brings to the world, and we have God to guide and protect us through the dark winter weeks ahead. The Bible assures us that we are children of the light and that the darkness is not to be feared. As the writer, Madeleine L'Engle, observes, it may be that you have to know the darkness in order to appreciate the light. As we face the trials that are an inevitable part of every hero's journey, this is the perfect time for you boys especially to explore which traits of masculinity might best help you navigate the difficulties, overcome the obstacles, and triumph over the trials to come. Today and in the weeks to come, we're going to consider the question of what it really means to be a man. Last week, Mr. Novak, you identified the words that are commonly associated with being a man, and those words, if you remember, we put in a box in the middle of the whiteboard. But you also identified words not often associated with masculinity. These were the words that were around the outside of the box. Words like dependence, patience, grace, humility, reverence, and gentleness. It's these kinds of characteristics that we will explore together, because underneath each one of these gentle appearances lies a surprising power. So please join me now in welcoming Mr. Irwin.
Thank you, Dr. Perryman, and good afternoon again, everyone. It's nice to be up in front of you. Fellow colleagues, and in front of you, Cardigan gentlemen. You don't have to wander far to hear that word echoing through the classrooms, dormitories, or playing fields of Cardigan Mountain School. Adults in our community tend to implore it whenever they seek a subtle reminder, now gentlemen, or perhaps not so subtle, gentlemen, that there is an expectation of manners and respect that we must accord one another, and that we are called to act with a certain level of civility reflective of gentlemanly behavior. But where does this term, this concept of being a gentleman, come from? I was eager to find out myself, so I did a little bit of research. It turns out that in Western tradition, the roots go back to medieval times, when a gentleman referred to someone of a higher social class. One could only be born into gentlemanly status in medieval times based on the nobility of one's family. Socially, the term evolved over the years to become more inclusive. By the Victorian era, any man from a good family who possessed sound character might be referred to as a gentleman, assuming that he had refined tastes, a cultured upbringing, and social graces. Today, our modern culture applies a much broader interpretation to the term, one that suggests politeness and sound character of all men, regardless of one's socioeconomic status or heritage. It's typically in this spirit, I think, that Cardigan boys are summoned to act as gentlemen, to be polite, respectful, considerate, etc. But in our discussion of masculinity this winter, we would be missing a huge opportunity if we did not unpack this concept a bit further to propose that it's not enough to simply act as a gentleman. In fact, that's the easy part, and it's more familiar to us. More difficult, yet still attainable, is also to be regarded as a gentle man. The socially constructed box of masculinity that Mr. Novak introduced during school meeting last week would likely not include gentleness as a word that fit inside of it. This is mostly because one of the challenges of gentleness in the masculine lexicon is that it's often confused with softness or weakness. Gentleness is not weakness. Gentleness is strength under control. Gentleness allows us to be tender. Gentleness allows us to be caring and nurturing to others. It helps us to stay calm and not escalate problems. It helps us to build others up. It places the other fellow first. Gentleness is not simply the way we carry eggs home from the grocery store or the way we hold a baby in our arms. Being gentle means treating others with kindness and compassion. It reveals true strength. The problem is that we don't see enough examples of gentle men being held up as models of masculinity towards which we can aspire. Not often in sports, movies, television, or advertising targeted towards men do we see gentleness expressed as a masculine virtue. But I imagine if we think about our own lives, we can reflect on some of the men we admire who are in fact gentle men. One of the many advantages of attending a boarding school is that you have the opportunity to know your teachers outside of the classroom. Some of you have male dorm parents who are also fathers. What a gift for you to witness these men, these positive role models of manhood, being gentle men in the care of their sons and daughters. When I became a father right before school started this year, I received a phone call from a friend of mine and former colleague at Deerfield. He's now in his late 50s with grown children of his own, and he called to congratulate Mandy and me on Willa's arrival. But he also wanted to share a meaningful story that has stayed with me and I imagine will stay with me for quite some time. My friend Mr. Bacher teaches physics at Deerfield. He's an incredibly smart and unassuming guy, and he's an exceptional teacher. The story he wanted to share with me, however, was not about teaching science, but rather about teaching fatherhood and the profound influence it can have on boarding school students. At a 20th year reunion from Deerfield, a former student returned to seek Mr. Bacher out to thank him for all that he had taught him years ago. Upon the introduction to this conversation, of which you can imagine Mr. Bacher had many over the course of the reunion weekend, he thought very little of what was to follow and admittedly told me that he had a hard time even remembering who this student was all these years later. What the former student said next was what stayed with him. "I want to thank you," this now 40-year-old man told him, "for teaching me how to be a good dad. I remember attending extra help sessions in your apartment, and every night I was there at 8 o'clock, you would politely let us know that the extra help session was ending because you were going upstairs to read bedtime stories with your sons. No matter how busy I am in my job today," this man explained, now with some tears and emotion in his eyes, "I'm always sure to be home in time to read bedtime stories to my own children. And I want to thank you for showing me at a young age what it meant to be a good father." It's a simple yet profound story, and one in which highlights one of my favorite traits about my friend Mr. Bacher, that he is indeed a gentle man. A prominent male role model in my life is the former director of Camp Belknap, Gene Clark, someone I would also call a gentle man, perhaps not always a gentleman, but a gentle man nonetheless. I started attending Belknap in 1993. It was several years into Gene's directorship, and I would go on to spend 21 years as a camper and staff member with him during his tenure. You can imagine those were some formative years in my own life, childhood, adolescence, young adulthood, and during those years, Gene became an important mentor and fatherly figure for me. Out of all of the traits I admired in him, of which there are many, chief among them was his gentleness. He had an uncanny ability to see character strengths in his staff members that they had not yet seen in themselves. And he would nurture and develop those strengths in his own gentle way. This would often involve a private conversation with him where he would genuinely tell you how proud he was of you, how much he loved you, and he cared deeply with you. He cared deeply for you and the other young men with whom he worked. He was unabashedly open about himself as an emotional man, one who cried often and found strength in hugging the tall white pine trees that surrounded the camp property. Growing out from his gentleness as a leader and his openness developed a culture where young men felt safe, a culture in which masculinity and emotional vulnerability were not mutually exclusive terms. A place where, like Jean, our director, we cried, we hugged, we told our friends how much we cared about them. And through his gentleness, he cultivated goodness and loyalty. He gave young men the confidence they needed to go out into the world and be good men, good gentlemen themselves. And so as you come of age into your own manhood, my hope for you is to embody all of those positive characteristics of being a gentleman. It's a dignified compliment to be thought of as such. But think too about how you can develop gentleness, because it's vital for the lives you are likely to lead as future leaders of society and as family men. We need more gentle leaders in the world, those individuals who are aware of and highly attuned to their power and influence, and who can embody the true meaning of gentleness, which is strength under control. In his essay, The Strength of Gentleness, author Dean Hawke illustrates this sentiment quite nicely. Hawke writes, "When my daughter was young, she used to love to squeeze my hand as hard as she could, trying to make it hurt. She could squeeze with all her might, but it never hurt. She didn't need to be gentle because she lacked the power to cause me any pain. Then just for fun, I'd give her hand a tight little squeeze until she yelped. It's the strong hand, not the weak one, that must learn to be gentle. Gentleness is a strong hand with a soft touch." Thank you.
Good afternoon, Cardigan brothers and faculty members. I'm honored to speak to you today on the subject of gentleness. I think that Mr. Irwin did a great job defining gentleness. I especially like the way he explained about acting like a gentleman and being a gentleman. I would like to tell you about a person who was both. Last year, the dorm leader of Dewar was a guy named Owen. Those of you who were here last year will surely remember him. For those of you who did not get to meet Owen, let me describe him to you. Owen was a big, strong guy. No, I mean he's a really big, strong guy. If you didn't know how Owen acted as a dorm leader, you might assume that he would be a really tough guy who would use a loud voice and his considerable strength to intimidate people into doing their dorm jobs. In fact, when I first saw Owen, I was intimidated by his size. As we began to interact with him, we discovered that he's such a good guy. He really polite to each one of us in the dorm. He asked us to do our dorm jobs in a really nice way, and he helped us when we needed. Every morning he woke up us by saying good morning, and every night he checked in with each person in the dorm and wished us a good night. His care for the boys in Dewar made the environment in our dorm the same as the environment in the family. I still remember one time when we were doing room inspection at night, I forgot to empty the trash can in my room. The first time Owen asked me to empty it, I said I would. But then I forgot to do it because I was busy working on a project. The second time he came upstairs, I thought he was going to be really mad at me because he had already asked me once. But no, he simply asked me again in a gentle voice to empty my trash can. At that point, I went to do that immediately. I felt really bad afterward because my dorm leader had treated me so nicely, and I had not done the thing that I was supposed to do. I felt bad about it because I did not want to let Owen down. His gentle leadership inspired other boys in our dorm to feel loyal to him and to one another. No one wanted to let Owen down, not because he would kill us if we did, but because we didn't want to disappoint such a good guy. We knew from experience that Owen would never let us down, so we tried as hard as we could to follow his lead. Overall, even though people sometimes think of gentleness as a weakness, it is actually a much powerful tool than being rude and using physical strength. If everyone at Cardigan could be gentle to each other, this community would be perfect. I want to ask you to take a moment to close your eyes. Now, imagine everyone on the campus being polite to each other. Every morning, you hear someone say good morning to you. During the day, as you are walking around campus, someone stops to ask how your day is going, or to ask about your game later that afternoon. As people walk on the buildings and on the paths outside, there's no rudeness, no blaming, no yelling, no complaining, and no criticizing on the campus. And finally, at the end of your busy day, you climb into bed, and a friendly voice wishes you a good night. You are surrounded and reassured by family atmosphere at Cardigan, and you feel safe and delighted to be here. Now open your eyes. I really believe that everyone wants that environment at Cardigan. As we ninth graders are beginning to graduate this year, we are considering the legacy that we would like to leave. At breakfast yesterday, Mr. McCosker read a letter from Corbin, who graduated last year. In his letter, Corbin said he hadn't realized what a gift it was to be at Cardigan until he was away from the point. I don't want to miss being a part of this community while I'm here, and I don't think any of you do either. So speaking on behalf of your senior Cardigan brothers, I would like to give our Cardigan community a gift. This gift is a challenge to everyone, both students and faculty, to be as gentle as possible at all times, so that together we can create and maintain the family atmosphere at Cardigan that all of us desire to live in. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Here at Cardigan Mountain School, we take pride and pleasure in recognizing the good efforts and achievements of those in our community, and we do so in many different ways. Our hallways are lined with photographs of school leaders, star athletes, and teams, with shelves of shiny trophies, and with framed student artwork that has been chosen for the school's permanent collection. Each week at our all-school meeting, good deeds are appreciated with kind bars. Throughout the year, boys are named Athletes of the Week, Students of the Month, and honored at assemblies with medals, ribbons, letters, pins, certificates, and prizes. But there is one award that is given not based so much on athletic prowess or academic achievement, but instead on greatness of character. We all call this award We call this award the Heart of the Cougar Award. Cougars in the wild are quiet creatures, known in mythology and Native American stories for their grace and power. As Mr. Irwin and Peter have explained, grace and power are not mutually exclusive terms. A person can be gentle and strong at the same time. In fact, some of the gentlest, most humble people have the greatest strength and make the biggest differences in the lives of those around them. It is the kind of strength and character that we recognize with the Heart of the Cougar Award. We are pleased to announce the recipient of today's award and to present him with the Heart of the Cougar tie. Today's recipient is a big guy, who is even bigger when he wears football pads and a helmet. A formidable opponent on the football field, he is also an unassuming gentle giant who loves to fish, play video games, and hang out with his friends. He quietly serves others and works behind the scenes to make sure others' needs are taken care of. He is a good friend to others and helps out where needed, without making a big deal of it. He brightens everyone's day by greeting them by name, asking about their day or their games, and by taking a real interest in the lives of others. He is a faithful steward, a loyal friend, a Cardigan movie star, a dedicated colleague, and a role model for the students of Cardigan Mountain School. He is Mr. Michael Plant.
Well, Mr. Plant, we do have one more surprise for you, and that's something that the boys in the community have made, and we hope that as you go into the next chapter of your life, you'll take a little piece of Cardigan with you when you go, and that you'll come back and visit us very often. And that is this picture that everybody has signed.
Oh, this is awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. And best of luck to Mr. Plant in your next adventure. At this time, we'll ask you to please rise and join in the singing of the Cardigan hymn. To Cardigan, our favorite school, by nature's gifts benign, we raise in song our thankfulness for beauty which is thine, for winter snow, for afterglow, when day fades into dreams of goals toward which we all will strive, to keep thy faiths alive, to keep thy faith in us alive. Together we will strive, as Cardigan is mirrored in our crystal lake so clear. May we through life reflect thy truths and memories as dear, of summer's green, fall's colors bright, of glimmering stars at night. God, give us strength to carry on through storm or weather fair, the peace vouchsafed by living here for all the world to share. Thank you. As we send you out this afternoon into the sunshine, and hopefully enjoy a wonderful afternoon of clubs and the week ahead, we send you with the words taken from the Hebrew Torah, which I'll read first in Hebrew, and then Dr. Perriman will recite in English. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom.
May the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace now and evermore. Amen.